The rain hammered against the windows of the small photography studio as Monica Harper carefully adjusted the lens of her camera. Her hands moved with practiced precision, despite the slight tremor that always appeared when she caught her reflection in the glass. The scar tissue that covered the left side of her face, a cruel souvenir from the car accident 5 years ago, stretched from her temple down to her jaw, a permanent reminder of the night that had changed everything. "Perfect," she whispered to herself, reviewing the portraits she'd just taken of the young couple celebrating their engagement. They had been kind, not staring too obviously at her disfigured face, though she'd noticed the way the bride-to-be had initially flinched when Monica first turned toward them. She was used to it by now. The double takes, the poorly concealed shock, the awkward silences that followed her introduction at social gatherings. Monica had built her business, captured moments photography, from the ground up after the accident. When her fiancé, Derek, had left her just 3 weeks after she was released from the hospital, she'd realized that her dreams of a normal life, marriage, children, Sunday brunnings with a loving husband, had died in that twisted metal wreckage along with her former appearance. Photography became her refuge, a way to create beauty while hiding behind the camera rather than standing in front of it. The studio phone rang, pulling her from her thoughts. Captured moments. "This is Monica speaking." "Yes, hello, I'm calling on behalf of Mr. Vincent Crawford," a crisp female voice announced. "Mr. Crawford is seeking a photographer for a private event next Saturday evening. We were given your name by the Harrington Gallery. Would you be available?" Monica's heart skipped. Vincent Crawford. Everyone in Seattle knew that name. The 34-year-old tech entrepreneur who had revolutionized cloud security systems and built a fortune estimated at over $3 billion. More recently, he'd become tabloid fodder after his very public breakup with supermodel Clarissa Davenport, who'd been photographed leaving his penthouse in tears before immediately flying to Paris with a French polo player. Yes, I believe I'm available," Monica managed, her professional demeanor kicking in despite her surprise. "What type of event are we discussing?" "It's a private dinner party. Very intimate. Mr. Crawford specifically requested a photographer who could be discreet and capture candid moments rather than posed shots. The Harrington Gallery owner mentioned you had an exceptional eye for authentic emotion." Pride warmed Monica's chest. She'd done a charity exhibition at the Harrington 6 months ago, black and white portraits of burn survivors and accident victims, titled Beauty Redefined. It had been her way of reclaiming her own narrative, though she'd never included a self-portrait. That would have been too vulnerable, too raw. "I'd be honored," Monica said. "Could you email me the details?" After ending the call, she sat in the quiet studio, listening to the rain. This could be the breakthrough she needed. Her work was good, she knew that. But landing a client like Vincent Crawford could open doors to the kind of elite clientele that would secure her business's future. She could finally afford to hire an assistant, maybe even expand to a larger space. The following Saturday arrived too quickly. Monica stood outside the towering glass building that housed Crawford's penthouse, her camera equipment bag slung over her shoulder. She'd chosen to wear all black, her standard uniform that allowed her to blend into the background at events, and had swept her dark hair forward on the left side, a habitual gesture to partially conceal her scars. The private elevator opened directly into the penthouse, and Monica stepped into a space that took her breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Seattle's skyline, now painted in the golden hues of sunset. Modern art adorned the walls, and the open floor plan seamlessly blended a gourmet kitchen, dining area, and living space filled with sleek, minimalist furniture. "You must be Ms. Harper." Monica turned toward the voice and found herself face-to-face with Vincent Crawford himself. She'd seen his photos in magazines and online, but they hadn't quite captured the intensity of his presence. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with dark hair that showed hints of silver at the temples despite his relative youth. His grey eyes were red-rimmed and exhausted, and there was a hollowness to his expression that no amount of expensive tailoring could hide. "Mr. Crawford," she said, extending her hand, "thank you for this opportunity." His handshake was firm but brief, and unlike most people, his gaze didn't linger on her scars. In fact, he barely seemed to register them at all, which was both refreshing and slightly disconcerting. "Vincent, please, I appreciate you coming on short notice." He gestured around the empty penthouse. As you can see, my dinner party is rather sparse at the moment. Monica glanced around, confused. The dining table was set for two, with candles waiting to be lit and an elaborate meal being prepared by what appeared to be a private chef in the kitchen. I'm sorry, I don't understand. Your assistant said, my assistant was instructed to tell you whatever was necessary to get you here, Vincent interrupted, running a hand through his hair. The truth is, there is no party. I wanted to hire you for something entirely different, and I suspected you wouldn't come if I'd been honest about the nature of the assignment. A cold prickle of alarm ran down Monica's spine. She took a subtle step backward, her hand tightening on her camera bag. Mr. Crawford, if this is some kind of... Please let me explain, he said quickly, holding up both hands in a gesture of peace. This isn't... I'm not trying to make you uncomfortable. I saw your exhibition at the Harrington Gallery. Beauty Redefined. I stood in that gallery for 2 hours studying every single photograph. The way you captured those people, not as victims, not as tragedies, but as triumphant, powerful, beautiful human beings. It was extraordinary. Monica's defensive posture softened slightly, though she remained wary. Thank you, but I still don't understand why you deceived me into coming here. Vincent walked to the windows, staring out at the city. 3 weeks ago, Clarissa left me. The tabloids say she ran off with Philippe Mercier, and they're not wrong. What they don't know is why she left. He turned back to face Monica, and there was such raw pain in his eyes that she felt her heart constrict. She told me I was emotionally unavailable, incapable of real intimacy, too damaged by my childhood to ever truly love someone. She said I was building walls instead of relationships, and that being with me was like living in a beautiful prison. I'm sorry, Monica said softly, meaning it, but I'm a photographer, not a therapist. I know, but here's what I realized while standing in your gallery. You understand something that most people don't. You understand that beauty and worth aren't the same thing as perfection. That scars, whether visible or invisible, don't diminish someone's value. He paused, seeming to gather his courage. I want to hire you to teach me how to see the way you see, to help me understand how to look beyond surfaces and connect with what's real. Monica stared at him, completely thrown off balance. This was perhaps the strangest request she'd ever received. That's not really something I can teach, Mr. Crawford. Vision, perspective, those develop through experience, through pain, Vincent finished quietly, through loss and disappointment and having everything you thought you knew about yourself stripped away. His eyes finally focused on her face, really seeing her for the first time. You've been through something terrible. I can see it in your work, in the way you photograph your subjects. And somehow you came through it with your ability to see beauty intact. I've been trying to buy happiness, to construct the perfect life, but I'm missing something fundamental. I thought maybe you could help me find it. The vulnerability in his voice, the desperate honesty of his admission, touched something deep in Monica's chest. She thought about all the empty years since her accident, the loneliness she'd wrapped around herself like armor, the way she'd convinced herself that her disfigurement had disqualified her from normal human connection. And here was this man, handsome, wealthy, with every advantage society could offer, just as lost and alone as she was. I don't know if I'm the right person for this, Monica admitted. I'm still figuring out most of it myself. Then maybe we can figure it out together, Vincent suggested. I'll pay you your regular rate plus expenses. All I'm asking is that you spend time with me. Take photographs, share your perspective, help me learn to see what you see. If after a few sessions you think I'm hopeless, we'll part ways with no hard feelings. Monica knew she should refuse. This was bizarre, unprofessional, and potentially complicated in ways she couldn't even begin to anticipate. But something in Vincent's eyes called to her. A kindred loneliness, a fellow traveler in the country of emotional exile. One session, she heard herself say. Let's start with one session and see how it goes. Vincent's shoulders sagged with relief. Thank you. Truly, he gestured toward the dining table. Would you join me for dinner? The chef has prepared enough for an army, and it seems a shame to waste it. We could consider it our first session. You can tell me about your work while we eat. As Monica set down her camera bag and walked toward the table, she caught sight of her reflection in the darkening windows. For just a moment, she didn't automatically focus on the scars, didn't feel the familiar shame and self-consciousness. Instead, she wondered what Vincent saw when he looked at her, and whether his broken heart might somehow recognize the cracks in her own. The candles were lit, the wine was poured, and as Seattle's lights began to twinkle across the skyline, Monica Harper found herself sharing a meal with a stranger who seemed to understand her in ways that no one had in 5 long years. She had no idea that this strange evening was about to transform both of their lives in ways neither could have possibly imagined. Over the following 2 weeks, Monica found herself returning to Vincent's penthouse 3 more times. What had started as an awkward professional arrangement gradually evolved into something she couldn't quite define. During their second meeting, Vincent had asked her to bring her camera and simply photograph him going about his evening routine, making coffee, reading emails, standing by the windows lost in thought. She'd expected him to be self-conscious, to pose and preen like most subjects did, but instead he seemed to forget she was there entirely. "You're different behind the camera," he'd observed during a break, pouring them both tea. "More confident, like you're in your element." "The camera creates distance," Monica had explained, cradling the warm mug between her hands. "It's a barrier between me and the world. I can observe without being observed." "But you're still being observed," Vincent had countered gently. "By me. Right now." The comment had flustered her, and she'd quickly hidden behind her camera again, snapping a candid shot of him smiling at her discomfort. When she'd reviewed the image later that night in her studio, she'd been struck by the genuine warmth in his expression, so different from the cold, calculated CEO who appeared in business magazines. Their third session took an unexpected turn. Vincent had suggested they leave the penthouse and walk through Pike Place Market, claiming he wanted to learn how she found subjects worth photographing in everyday settings. Monica had been reluctant. Public outings meant stares, meant the inevitable moment when strangers registered her appearance and either looked away too quickly or stared too long. "I haven't been to the market in years," Vincent admitted as they strolled past vendors selling fresh flowers and handmade crafts. "Not since before I started my first company. I used to come here every Sunday morning, back when I was just another struggling programmer living in a studio apartment in Capitol Hill." Monica had watched him through her viewfinder as he stopped to examine a display of hand-blown glass, his fingers hovering over a delicate blue vase, but not quite touching it, as if he'd forgotten how to interact with objects that served no practical purpose. She'd snapped the photo without thinking. The contrast between his expensive watch and the simple beauty he was contemplating, the longing in his expression for a simpler time. "Do you miss it?" she'd asked. "That version of your life?" "Every single day," he'd answered, surprising her with his honesty. "I had nothing back then, but I also had everything. Friends I'd stay up all night with, talking about ideas and dreams. A girlfriend who loved me when I was broke and uncertain about my future. Now I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, and I can't remember the last time someone looked at me and saw Vincent instead of Vincent Crawford, billionaire." To us, they'd been standing near a flower stall when an elderly woman selling bouquets had called out to them. "Such a beautiful couple. Let me wrap you some roses. Fresh cut this morning. Perfect for your sweetheart." Monica had felt her face flush, immediately starting to correct the woman's assumption. But Vincent had simply smiled and said, "We'll take the yellow ones. They match her spirit." As he'd paid for the flowers and handed them to Monica, their fingers had brushed, and she'd felt an electric jolt of awareness that had nothing to do with static electricity. The way he looked at her in that moment, with genuine affection and something that might have been wonder, had made her heart race in a way she'd thought impossible after Derek's abandonment. "Yellow roses mean friendship," she'd managed to say, her voice slightly unsteady. "I know," Vincent had replied, his grey eyes holding hers, "but they also mean remembrance, and I want to remember this moment." Now, sitting in her studio on a rainy Thursday afternoon, Monica developed the photographs from their market visit. She'd promised to curate a collection for Vincent, images that would help him see the world differently, as he'd put it. But as she studied the prints emerging in her darkroom, she realized that something fundamental had shifted in her own perspective. There was the shot of Vincent laughing at a street performer's joke, his usual guardedness completely absent. Another of him kneeling to pet a vendor's dog, his expression soft with uncomplicated joy. And then there was the one that made her breath catch. Vincent looking directly at the camera at her, with an intensity that seemed to see straight through all her carefully constructed defenses. Her phone buzzed with a text message. "Dinner tonight. My place. I promise it's not another fake party. Monica smiled despite herself. Over their sessions together, Vincent had begun opening up about his past, a childhood spent in foster care after his parents died in a house fire when he was 8, the series of temporary homes where he'd never quite belonged, the way he'd learned to rely only on himself. His drive to succeed, he'd admitted, came from a desperate need to build something permanent, something that couldn't be taken away. But money and success can't love you back, he'd said during their last meeting, his voice rough with emotion. Clarissa was right about that. I've been so focused on building an empire that I forgot to build a life. Monica had understood completely. Hadn't she done the same thing after her accident? Hidden behind her camera, built a business, convinced herself that professional success could substitute for personal connection. She texted back, "I'll be there at 7. Should I bring my camera? Only if you promise to let me photograph you for once." The suggestion sent a spike of anxiety through her chest. She'd spent 5 years avoiding cameras, refusing to be documented in her current state. The last professional photo of her, the one that still appeared on her studio's website, had been taken 2 weeks before the accident, showing a vibrant 26-year-old woman with smooth skin and an unguarded smile. That woman felt like a stranger now. But Vincent had been so vulnerable with her, sharing his deepest insecurities and fears. Could she do any less? "We'll see," she typed, which they both knew meant maybe, which was more than she'd offered anyone else in years. That evening, Monica stood in front of her bathroom mirror longer than usual, debating how to wear her hair. She finally swept it back from her face entirely, fully exposing the scars she usually tried to hide. If Vincent truly wanted to learn how to see beyond surfaces, then she would give him that opportunity. No more hiding. The penthouse door was unlocked when she arrived, and she found Vincent in the kitchen actually cooking. Not directing a private chef, but genuinely cooking, with flour dusting his expensive shirt and a look of intense concentration on his face as he rolled out pasta dough. "You cook?" Monica asked, surprised. "I'm learning," he admitted, looking up with a self-deprecating grin. "Mrs. Chen, my housekeeper, has been giving me lessons. She says I need to remember how to do things with my own hands, create things that aren't just business deals and profit margins." He paused, really looking at her, and his expression softened. "You wore your hair back." Monica touched her exposed scars self-consciously. "You said you wanted to learn to see what's real. This is real. This is me." Vincent set down his rolling pin and walked around the counter, stopping just in front of her. For a long moment he simply looked at her face, not flinching, not staring with morbid curiosity, but really seeing her. Then he reached up and gently traced the line of scarring with his fingertips, his touch feather-light and achingly tender. "You are extraordinary," he said softly, "not in spite of this, but including this." Every line tells a story of survival, of strength, of refusing to let tragedy define you. How could anyone see this as anything but beautiful? Tears sprang to Monica's eyes before she could stop them. In 5 years, no one had touched her scars with anything approaching reverence. Most people could barely look at them. Even the plastic surgeon who performed her reconstructive surgeries had maintained a clinical detachment, discussing her face in terms of medical outcomes rather than acknowledging the emotional devastation beneath. "Derek couldn't," she whispered. "The man I was supposed to marry. He took one look at me in that hospital bed and I saw the truth in his eyes. He didn't see me anymore. He saw damaged goods." "Then Derek was a coward and a fool," Vincent said firmly, his hands moving to cup her face, his thumbs gently brushing away her tears. "And I'm grateful to him for only one thing. If he'd been brave enough to stay, you wouldn't be standing in my kitchen right now teaching me how to be human again." The air between them seemed to crackle with possibility. Monica's heart hammered against her ribs as Vincent leaned slowly toward her, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But she didn't want to pull away. For the first time in 5 years, she wanted to be seen, to be touched, to be desired exactly as she was. His lips met hers in a kiss that was both tentative and electric, a question and an answer all at once. Monica's hands found their way to his shoulders, steadying herself against the dizzying rush of emotion. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "I know this is probably completely unprofessional," he murmured, And if you want to forget this happened and maintain our arrangement as strictly business, I'll understand. But Monica, I need you to know. You've awakened something in me that I thought Clarissa had destroyed forever. You've reminded me what it feels like to connect with someone real, someone who understands pain and beauty and the messy complexity of being human. Before Monica could respond, Vincent's phone erupted with urgent ringtones. He pulled it from his pocket with a frustrated sigh, glancing at the screen. His expression immediately hardened. "I have to take this," he said apologetically. "It's my attorney. There's been a development with Clarissa." He stepped away to answer the call, and Monica watched his body language shift from the warm, open man who'd just kissed her to the guarded CEO she'd first met. His responses were terse. "When? How much? And she's threatening what exactly?" When he ended the call, his face was ashen. "Clarissa is claiming I promised to marry her. She's filed a breach of promise lawsuit seeking $50 million in damages. Her attorney is threatening to go to the press with intimate details about our relationship unless I settle immediately." Monica felt a chill run through her. Can she do that? Legally, it's a gray area. Breach of promise suits are rare these days, but not unheard of. The real damage will be the publicity, the tabloid feeding frenzy. Vincent's jaw clenched. But here's the part my lawyer just discovered. Clarissa was still legally married to her second husband when we started dating. The divorce wasn't finalized until 6 months into our relationship, which means her entire claim is built on a foundation of deception. "What are you going to do?" Vincent looked at her, and she saw the calculating strategist behind his eyes, the man who'd built a billion-dollar empire through shrewd decisions and calculated risks. "I'm going to fight, but it's going to get ugly, and anyone associated with me is going to get dragged through the mud alongside me." He reached for her hand. "Which is why I need to know right now before this goes any further. Are you willing to stand beside someone who's about to become tabloid poison? Because if we continue down this path, Monica, your privacy will be shredded. Reporters will dig into your past, your accident, everything. They'll print your photo next to Clarissa's and make cruel comparisons. The world can be vicious to people it perceives as ugly," Monica finished quietly, surprising herself with how steady her voice sounded. "Vincent, I've spent 5 years convinced that my scars disqualified me from normal life, from love, from happiness. If you're asking whether I'm brave enough to face the world's judgment, then you should know. I've been facing it every single day since the accident. The only difference is that now, for the first time, I won't be facing it alone." The lawsuit broke in the media exactly 3 days later, and it was every bit as brutal as Vincent had predicted. Monica woke up to 17 missed calls and a flood of text messages from friends and former clients. When she finally opened a news website, she found her own face staring back at her, a paparazzi photo taken outside Vincent's building 2 nights earlier, with a headline that made her stomach turn. "Crawford's mystery woman from supermodel to scarred photographer, Billionaire's desperate rebound." The article was vicious. It compared her photographs side by side with glamorous shots of Clarissa, speculated about Vincent's mental state, and included quotes from anonymous sources claiming Monica was taking advantage of a heartbroken man. One particularly cruel gossip columnist wrote, "One has to wonder what Crawford sees in this disfigured camera operator. Perhaps he's punishing himself for losing Davenport, or maybe his judgment has been clouded by his recent emotional turmoil." Monica sat in her studio staring at the screen until the words blurred together. This was exactly what she'd feared for 5 years, being put on display, judged, found wanting. Her phone rang again, and this time she answered. "Don't read it." Vincent's voice came through tight with anger. "Please, Monica, don't torture yourself with their garbage." "Too late," she said, surprised by how calm she sounded. "They're calling me a disfigured camera operator, not even a photographer. Just someone who operates a camera. I'm going to destroy them," Vincent said flatly. "My legal team is already drafting lawsuits for defamation. These publications will regret—" "Vincent, no." Monica stood and walked to her studio window, looking out at the ordinary street below where ordinary people went about their ordinary lives, blissfully unaware of billionaire lawsuits and media circuses. Fighting them just feeds the story. It makes it bigger. So we just let them say these things about you. We live our truth and let them choke on their lies, Monica said, feeling something solidify in her chest. a core of steel she hadn't known she possessed. "You wanted to learn how to see beyond surfaces. Here's your first real test. Can you look at me and still see the woman you kissed in your kitchen, or do you see what they see? Damaged goods that make you look pathetic?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Vincent said very quietly, "I'm coming to get you right now. There's something I need to show you." 20 minutes later, Monica found herself in Vincent's car. Not a limousine with a driver, but Vincent himself behind the wheel of a surprisingly modest sedan, driving them out of the city. They headed east into the mountains, the autumn landscape blurring past in shades of gold and crimson. "Where are we going?" Monica asked. "Someplace I haven't been in 15 years, Vincent replied. "Someplace I've been too ashamed to visit, too afraid of facing what I left behind." They drove for nearly 2 hours, finally turning onto a rutted dirt road that led to a ramshackle farmhouse surrounded by overgrown fields. The property looked abandoned, the house's paint peeling, the barn's roof partially collapsed. But there was something beautiful about it too, the way the afternoon sun gilded the tall grass, the ancient apple trees still bearing fruit, despite years of neglect. Vincent parked and sat for a moment, his hands gripping the steering wheel. This was the last foster home I lived in before I aged out of the system. The Hendersons, Tom and Janet. They were in their 60s, couldn't have children of their own, so they fostered kids nobody else wanted. The angry ones, the broken ones. He paused. They took me in when I was 15, after I'd been kicked out of 3 other placements for fighting. Monica watched his profile, seeing the boy he must have been, scared, angry, convinced the world owed him nothing but pain. "Tom taught me to code," Vincent continued, his voice thick with emotion. "He'd been a computer engineer before he retired, and he saw something in me, some potential I couldn't see in myself. They told me I could stay here, that they wanted to adopt me, make it permanent. But I was so convinced that everything good would eventually be taken away that I ran. The day I turned 18, I took the money I'd saved from my part-time job and disappeared into Seattle. I never came back, never called, never thanked them for the only real home I'd ever known. Vincent. Janet died 8 years ago," he said. "I found out from an obituary. I was already a millionaire by then, could have flown back for the funeral, but I didn't. I told myself I was too busy, too important. The truth is, I was too much of a coward to face what I'd thrown away." He finally turned to look at her. "Tom still lives here. He's 79 now. I tracked him down last year, had my assistant send him money anonymously for repairs, for medical bills. But money isn't what he needed from me." Understanding dawned on Monica. "You want to see him." "I want us to see him," Vincent corrected, "because you asked me if I could see beyond the surface, and the answer is that I'm still learning. But I know that real courage isn't about facing down business competitors or fighting lawsuits. It's about facing the people we've hurt, admitting our mistakes, and hoping they'll see past our failures to the person we're trying to become." They walked to the farmhouse together, and Vincent knocked on the weathered door. The man who answered was elderly but upright, with sharp blue eyes that widened in recognition. "Vince?" Tom Henderson's voice cracked. "Vincent Crawford?" "Hi, Tom," Vincent said, and Monica heard the boy he'd been in those 2 simple words. "I know I have no right to show up here after all these years, but I needed to tell you something. I needed to say I'm sorry." What happened next made Monica's throat tighten with emotion. Tom Henderson, this elderly man who had every right to slam the door in Vincent's face, instead pulled him into a fierce embrace. "Boy, I've been waiting 15 years for you to come home." They spent the afternoon in Tom's modest kitchen, drinking coffee and talking. Vincent told Tom everything, his success, his failures, his broken engagement to Clarissa, and his lawsuit. He introduced Monica, not as his photographer or his consultant, but as someone who's teaching me how to be brave. Tom had studied Monica's face with the same sharp intelligence she'd seen in Vincent, then nodded approvingly. "You've got kind eyes," he'd said simply. "The world's going to judge you for all sorts of foolish reasons, but anyone with sense can see you've got a good heart. That's what matters." As the sun began to set, Tom walked them out to his porch and placed a weathered hand on Vincent's shoulder. "You know what your problem always was, Vince? You thought love had to be earned, that you had to be perfect to deserve it. But that's not how it works. Love isn't a transaction. It's a gift, freely given, no conditions attached." He glanced at Monica. "This young lady knows that. I can see it in how she looks at you, not at your money or your success, but at you. Don't be stupid enough to run from that. On the drive back to Seattle, Vincent reached across the console and took Monica's hand. Thank you for coming with me today. I know this whole situation has become complicated and messy, and you didn't sign up for any of this. Actually, Monica said, I think maybe I did. When I agreed to that first session, I told myself it was just a job, just another client. But somewhere deep down, I knew it was more than that. I knew you were offering me something I'd been too afraid to reach for, a chance to step out from behind the camera and actually live again. They were still an hour from the city when Vincent's phone rang. His attorney's name flashed on the screen and he answered on speaker. Vincent, we've got a problem. Marcus Webb's voice filled the car. Clarissa's team just released a statement to the press. She's claiming that Monica Harper is the reason your relationship fell apart, that you were having an emotional affair before the breakup. She's produced text messages that she says prove you were already involved with another woman. Monica felt ice flood her veins. But that's impossible. I didn't even meet Vincent until after they broke up. I know that, and so does everyone who knows the timeline, Marcus said grimly. But she's doctored the metadata on the messages. Unless we can prove they're fabricated, this is going to look very bad. The narrative will shift from you being a rebound to you being a homewrecker. Vincent's jaw clenched, his free hand tightening on the steering wheel. How long do we have before this goes public? The press conference is scheduled for tomorrow morning. Vincent, I strongly advise you to settle. Cut her a check, sign an NDA, make this go away before it destroys both your reputations. No, Vincent said flatly. We fight. Vincent, think about what you're risking. I am thinking about it. For the first time in years, I'm thinking clearly. Clarissa is counting on me being too proud or too afraid of scandal to call her bluff, but I'm done letting fear make my decisions. He looked at Monica. We have the truth on our side. That has to count for something. After Marcus hung up, Monica said quietly, you could still settle. $50 million is nothing to you, and it would make all of this go away. You don't have to sacrifice your reputation to protect mine. Vincent pulled the car over to the side of the road and turned to face her fully. Monica, do you know what I see when I look at you? What? I see a woman who survived a tragedy that would have broken most people. I see someone who took their pain and transformed it into art, who found a way to help others see their own beauty when the world tried to convince them they were broken. I see courage and strength and a capacity for love that terrifies me because it makes me want to be worthy of it. He cupped her scarred cheek in his palm. You are perfect to me. Not despite your scars, not even including them. You are perfect, period. And I'll be damned if I'm going to let Clarissa Davenport or anyone else make you doubt that, for even a second. Monica felt tears spill down her cheeks, but for once they weren't tears of shame or pain. They were tears of recognition, of being truly seen for the first time since her accident. What if they destroy you? What if fighting this costs you everything? Then I'll have lost money and reputation, Vincent said simply. But I'll have kept my integrity. And I'll have you if you'll have me. That's worth more than any amount of wealth or public approval. Before Monica could respond, her own phone buzzed with an incoming call. The number was unfamiliar, but something made her answer. Is this Monica Harper? A woman's voice asked. Yes, who is this? My name is Jennifer Walsh. I'm a reporter for the Seattle Tribune. I'm calling because I've been investigating Clarissa Davenport's lawsuit, and I think you should know. She's done this before. Twice. Different men, different cities, same playbook. Fabricated evidence, threatened scandal, and both times the men settled rather than fight. But I have proof. Testimony from her previous targets. Documentation of her pattern of behavior. If you and Mr. Crawford are willing to go on record, I can break this story tomorrow and expose her for the fraud she is. Monica looked at Vincent, saw the same fierce determination in his eyes that she felt rising in her own chest. They'd been tested by fire, both separately and now together. It was time to stop hiding, stop letting fear dictate their choices. We're willing, Monica said. Tell us what you need. As they pulled back onto the highway, heading toward whatever storm awaited them in Seattle, Monica felt something she hadn't experienced in 5 long years. Hope, not the fragile, tentative hope that could be shattered by a single harsh word, but something solid and enduring. She'd spent so long believing her scars had made her unlovable that she'd have to settle for a half-life lived in the shadows. But Vincent had shown her a different truth, that real love didn't flinch from imperfection, it embraced it. And maybe, just maybe, she was finally ready to embrace it too. The Seattle Tribune's front page the next morning changed everything. Jennifer Walsh's investigative piece titled "Pattern of Deception: How Clarissa Davenport Weaponized Romance" laid bare a decade-long history of calculated manipulation. The article included interviews with two other wealthy men who'd paid settlements to avoid scandal, bank records showing suspicious deposits into Clarissa's accounts, and most damning of all, email correspondence between Clarissa and her attorney, planning the entire scheme before she'd even broken up with Vincent. Monica stood in Vincent's penthouse kitchen, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of rose and gold, while news outlets scrambled to update their coverage. Her phone had been ringing non-stop since 5 in the morning, former clients offering support, fellow photographers expressing solidarity, even a few brave souls from her past reaching out to apologize for their silence after her accident. "The police have opened an investigation into fraud and extortion," Vincent said, ending yet another call with his attorney. "Marcus says Clarissa's lawyer has already withdrawn from the case. She's finished." Monica turned to find him watching her with an expression that made her heart skip. He looked exhausted. They'd been up most of the night coordinating with Jennifer and Marcus, but there was a lightness to him that hadn't been there before, as if some massive weight had finally been lifted from his shoulders. "How do you feel?" she asked. Relieved, vindicated, angry that it took investigative journalism to make people see what should have been obvious from the start. He crossed the kitchen to stand beside her at the window. "But mostly, I feel grateful. If Clarissa hadn't tried to destroy me, I never would have seen your exhibition at the Harrington Gallery. I never would have had an excuse to bring you into my life." "That's a twisted way to find gratitude," Monica said, but she was smiling. "Maybe. But I'm learning that sometimes the most beautiful things grow from the messiest soil." Vincent took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "I have a proposition for you, a real one this time. Not some elaborate deception to trick you into coming to my apartment." Monica raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." "Tom called me this morning. He wants to sell the farm, says he's too old to maintain it, and he'd rather see it go to someone who'll actually use it rather than letting it rot away. He's offering it to me first." Vincent paused, seeming to gather his courage. "I want to buy it, not as an investment, not to flip it for profit, but to restore it, to turn it into something meaningful." "What did you have in mind?" "A foundation, a place where foster kids aging out of the system can learn practical skills, farming, coding, photography, whatever speaks to them. A place where they can feel safe and valued while they figure out who they want to become." His gray eyes searched hers. "I want you to run it with me. Co-founders, equal partners. We could create something that actually makes a difference in people's lives." Monica felt her breath catch. This wasn't just a business proposal. It was an invitation into Vincent's future, into the life he was building from the ashes of his old one. "Vincent, I don't know anything about running a foundation or working with foster youth." "Neither do I," he admitted. "But we both know what it's like to feel broken, to be told by the world that we're somehow less than. We know how much it matters when someone sees past the surface and recognizes your worth. That's what we'd offer these kids, a place where their scars, whether visible or invisible, are badges of survival rather than marks of shame." Monica thought about the years she'd spent hiding behind her camera, convinced that her disfigurement had disqualified her from making a real impact on the world. She thought about the young people who must feel the same way. Foster kids bouncing between homes, told they were problems to be managed rather than human beings deserving of love. What if she could help them see themselves the way Vincent had helped her see herself? "Yes," she heard herself say. "Yes, I want to do this with you." Vincent's face broke into the most genuine smile she'd ever seen from him, and he pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she were something precious and irreplaceable. "Thank you," he whispered against her hair, "for taking a chance on a broken billionaire who didn't know how to see what was right in front of him." "You were never broken," Monica said, pulling back to look at him. "Just lost. We both were." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Vincent put his considerable resources behind the foundation, hiring architects to design the renovation of Tom's farmhouse, recruiting social workers and educators to develop programming, and establishing partnerships with the state foster care system. Monica threw herself into creating a photography curriculum, envisioning workshops where young people could learn to document their own stories, to see beauty in unexpected places. The media coverage shifted dramatically in their favor. What had started as a scandal became an inspirational story. The billionaire and the photographer, who'd found each other in their darkest moments and were now channeling their experiences into helping others. Interview requests flooded in, but Monica and Vincent were selective, agreeing only to those that would genuinely benefit the foundation. One afternoon, 3 months after Jennifer Walsh's article broke, Monica received an unexpected visitor at her studio. She opened the door to find a woman in her early 30s with kind eyes and a hesitant smile. "I'm sorry to just show up like this," the woman said. "My name is Rachel Morrison. I was one of the subjects in your Beauty Redefined exhibition at the Harrington Gallery, the burn survivor. You photographed me last year." Monica remembered her immediately, a firefighter who'd been injured saving a family from a house fire. "Rachel, of course, come in please. What brings you here?" Rachel stepped into the studio, looking around at Monica's work displayed on the walls. "I wanted to thank you. After that exhibition, I started getting recognition calls from other burn survivors wanting to share their stories. It made me realize that my scars weren't something to hide. They were proof that I'd done something meaningful with my life. And then I saw the news about you and Vincent Crawford, about the foundation you're starting." She paused, meeting Monica's eyes. "I want to volunteer. If you'll have me, I'd like to help teach these kids that their worth isn't determined by how others see them." By the time the Henderson Hope Foundation officially opened its doors 6 months later, Monica and Vincent had assembled a team of volunteers that included burn survivors, accident victims, veterans with PTSD, and former foster youth who'd overcome incredible odds. The renovated farmhouse gleamed with fresh paint. The fields had been cleared and replanted, and the old barn had been transformed into a state-of-the-art learning center. Tom Henderson, looking healthier than he had in years, cut the ribbon at the opening ceremony. "When I took in angry young Vincent 15 years ago," he told the assembled crowd, "I never imagined he'd grow up to be the man standing before you today." But then again, that's the whole point, isn't it? We never really know what someone will become if we just give them a chance to bloom. That evening, after the last visitors had left and the sun was setting over the mountains, Vincent found Monica sitting on the farmhouse porch, her camera in her lap. "Tired?" he asked, settling beside her on the swing. "Exhausted," Monica admitted, "but happy, really, genuinely happy for the first time in I don't even know how long." Vincent took her hand, and Monica noticed he was holding something, a small velvet box that made her heart start to race. "Monica Harper, I need to tell you something. When I first saw you at your exhibition, I was struck by your work, by the way you could capture truth and beauty in a single frame. But it wasn't until I actually met you, until I spent time learning how you see the world, that I understood what I was really looking at. I was looking at someone who'd been through hell and came out the other side with her capacity for love and compassion, not just intact, but amplified." He opened the box to reveal a simple platinum band set with a single diamond. "I'm not asking you to marry me, not yet. We've only known each other for 8 months, and I want to do this right. Give us time to build something real and lasting. But I am asking you to wear this ring as a promise, that I see you, all of you, and that I choose you every single day. Will you make that same promise to me?" Monica felt tears streaming down her face, but they were tears of joy so pure it almost hurt. She thought about Derek, who'd looked at her scars and seen only damage. She thought about the 5 years she'd spent convinced that love was something other people deserved, but not her. And she thought about this extraordinary man who'd been just as lost and broken as she was, who'd somehow found his way to her through the darkness. "Yes," she said, her voice steady despite the tears. "Yes, I promise to see you and choose you, every single day." As Vincent slipped the ring onto her finger, Monica lifted her camera with her free hand and snapped a photo of their joined hands, the ring catching the last rays of sunlight. It was a perfect shot, the kind of image that told a complete story in a single frame. Not a fairy tale ending, but something better. A beginning. 2 years later, Monica stood in the very same spot on the farmhouse porch, now wearing a wedding band alongside her promise ring. The foundation had grown beyond their wildest dreams, serving over 200 foster youth in its first 18 months. Many of them had gone on to college, to careers, to lives they'd never imagined possible. The photography program Monica had developed had become so successful that other organizations were asking to replicate it. Vincent emerged from the house carrying their 6-month-old daughter, Lily, who gurgled happily in his arms. They'd named her after Janet Henderson, Tom's late wife, the woman who taught Vincent that love wasn't something you had to earn. "She's got your eyes," Vincent said, settling beside Monica on the swing. "And hopefully, your talent for seeing beauty everywhere." Monica watched her husband, still strange and wonderful to think that word, gently bouncing their daughter, and felt overwhelmed by gratitude. She'd spent so many years believing her scars had written the ending to her story, that the accident had stolen her chance at happiness. But she'd been wrong. The scars weren't an ending, they were a comma, a pause before the most beautiful chapter of her life began. Her phone buzzed with a message from Jennifer Walsh, the reporter who'd helped expose Clarissa's fraud. "Just heard from Clarissa's latest victim. Thanks to your willingness to go public, he found the courage to fight back instead of settling. You two started something important." Monica showed the message to Vincent, who smiled. "We did, didn't we? Just by refusing to let other people's judgments define us." As the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, Monica thought about the exhibition that had started everything. Beauty Redefined. She'd created it to help other people see themselves differently, never imagining it would transform her own life so completely. Tom emerged from the house, moving more slowly now at 81, but still sharp as ever. "Dinner's ready. And before you ask, yes, I made enough for an army. Some of the kids from the current cohort are joining us." They gathered around the farmhouse table. Vincent, Monica, baby Lily, Tom, and 6 teenagers from the Foundation's residential program. As they shared the meal, the teenagers talked excitedly about their projects. A coding app being developed, a series of nature photographs being prepared for exhibition, plans for a community garden. Monica caught Vincent's eye across the table and saw her own wonder reflected back at her. They'd both spent so much of their lives feeling like outsiders, convinced they had to hide their true selves to be accepted. But here, in this restored farmhouse surrounded by young people who were just beginning to understand their own worth, they'd finally found their place. After dinner, as they tucked Lily into her crib, Vincent said, "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't seen your exhibition? If I'd never worked up the courage to bring you into my life?" Monica considered the question. "I think we would have found each other eventually. Maybe not in the same way, but somehow. I think broken people recognize each other, even in a crowded room. We're drawn to fellow survivors." "Maybe," Vincent agreed. "Or maybe we just got incredibly lucky." "Both can be true," Monica said, kissing him softly. "We got lucky, and we were brave enough to choose each other when it would have been safer to stay hidden." Years later, when people asked Monica about her scars, she no longer felt the familiar twist of shame and embarrassment. Instead, she thought about a heartbroken billionaire who'd looked at her disfigured face and seen perfection. She thought about a foundation that had helped hundreds of young people discover their worth. She thought about a daughter who would grow up knowing that beauty came in infinite forms, that scars told stories of survival, and that love, real love, saw beyond surfaces to the truth beneath. The woman who'd once hidden behind her camera had stepped fully into the light, scars and all. And in doing so, she discovered something profound. She wasn't perfect, despite her imperfections. She was perfect, period. Just as Vincent had always said. The Henderson Hope Foundation continued to thrive, expanding to 3 additional locations over the following decade. Monica's photography curriculum became a national model, taught in schools and community centers across the country. Vincent scaled back his business ventures to focus on philanthropy, finding more satisfaction in changing lives than in accumulating wealth. And every year on the anniversary of their first meeting, they returned to the Harrington Gallery, where Monica's Beauty Redefined exhibition had started it all. They'd stand together in front of the photographs, remembering the broken people they'd been and marveling at the whole people they'd become. Because that was the secret Vincent had been searching for when he'd first sought out Monica, the key to seeing beyond surfaces, to recognizing real beauty. It wasn't something that could be taught or bought. It was something that could only be learned through vulnerability, through allowing yourself to be truly seen, scars and all. Monica Harper had been told she was too ugly for any man to love. But a heartbroken billionaire had looked at her and said, "You are perfect to me." And in those 6 words, he'd given her back something the accident had stolen. Not her unmarred face, but something far more precious, the ability to see herself as worthy of love. That was the greatest gift of all.